Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Jonny Lazarus, big Rangers fan. How's it going, man? Thanks for coming on.
Good to be here, Bubbs. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to talking a little Rangers here. Obviously, a lot going on. Third in the Metropolitan, 38, 19, and 10, 86 points on the season. Coming off a nice win, much needed win, I feel like, last night at the Garden against the Capitals before the two big games coming up against Pittsburgh. I want to take a little bit of kind of a step back, going back to the trade deadline. Rangers obviously did a lot. Drury realized the cap situation. We can kind of go all in this year. He realized what's ahead of us, in the Eastern Conference with the Bruins, the Hurricanes, the Devils, all those teams as big threats. Kind of to recap the trade deadline, your thoughts on the Tarasenko, Kane, and obviously bringing back Mott, who was with us a year ago for the playoff run last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think my thoughts are, for the most part, aligned with everyone who's been watching this team for a long time. And, do I think Patrick Kane and Tarasenko were the correct answer? Not necessarily, but if you can get those two players for what we got them for, I mean, how could you pass up that opportunity? I don't think any of the other 31 teams would have passed that up. I think Kane, has looked great thus far. He hasn't looked at his best, but, we all know what we got when we were getting a 34-year-old Patrick Kane. Not a defensive player, but he can score goals in the big times. So, listen, I'm not like incredibly impressed with Kane right now, but I'm happy with him. I think he's been a good addition, and just his presence on the team in the locker room and even in the fan base in the city, I think goes such a long way. And then, obviously a guy like Tarasenko can really turn his game up in the playoffs. He scored some pretty nice goals so far. He's also made some incredible passes. His pass to Zibanejad last night was phenomenal for the game's first goal. So, listen, I think, I don't know if anyone's going to say that there's a more skilled team than the Rangers right now. It's more so if they can just put it all together. And, I think that's been the biggest issue in the past is the Rangers just don't seem to, find that extra step, that like little more grittiness that the other teams seem to have that can win the Stanley Cup. And, I think it showed last year in that Tampa series that they just couldn't really outwill Tampa. And this team's going to struggle with that too. So, I think people should expect them to struggle. And listen, a part of winning the Stanley Cup is struggling and getting through it. So I'm excited. I think every fan should be excited. Anyone who doubted Patrick Kane should feel a little good about the situation now with how he's played thus far. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team can do.
Yeah, you're spot on. I definitely, feel what you're saying there, especially about Kane. Obviously, 3 Stanley Cups, not quite the player he once was, but definitely a guy that, goal scoring can give you, again, not so much defensively, but can be that goal scorer that we've all seen him be throughout his career, obviously in Chicago. You mentioned a little about the physicality, and I noticed that, you noticed that, every Ranger fan knows that, as you mentioned, especially in that Tampa series where we kind of lost it. Tampa had a lot more physicality, much more experienced playoff team. Where do you think that's going to need to come from? Do you feel like, Lindgren, a guy like him, is going to need to step up more, Trouba, guys like that? How do you feel we're going to have to piece it together physicality-wise?
So I'm going to go right to the kid line. I think Alexi Lafreniere, Filipino, and Capo Caco were, a surprisingly physical line last year in the playoffs. They generated a lot of their scoring chances based off the forecheck. Lafreniere has shown a lot of physicality. Caco as well. Heedle not as much, but I think you can argue two different things about the Rangers, and one of them is that the team goes as far as Mika goes. Obviously that also goes with Igor Shesterkin when he stands on his head, but then when the kid line's going, it seems like the whole team is going. And I think the last, 10 or so games, they've been a little quieter, actually. If you look at their stats, the last 10 games, Alexi Lafreniere has 4 goals, 0 assists. Filipino has 0 goals, 2 assists, and Kako has 1 goal and 2 assists. So they've been pretty quiet, and that's why the team's been slumping a little bit aside from that Capitals game. I think it just goes to show you when those three are at their game and, really just playing a north-south style and being aggressive, that the team is so much better. So I would look for the physicality to come from those guys. And listen, they did it last year. They showed it last year, and they can do it once again.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously last year, too, to add on to it, was a lot of valuable experience for them. First time in the postseason, obviously, but, got to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think many of us saw them getting past Pittsburgh after they went down 3-1 to have, go back to Carolina, win Game 7, all that great stuff. A lot of experience. So I definitely agree with you there. I want to get into kind of the lines and the situation with that, specifically with the forward lines. You talked about the kid line. What were your thoughts on Gallant, or during the Sabres and the Penguins game, moving Kane down with Lafreniere and Hedel, and then Kreider, Trocheck, Kakko. What were your thoughts on that?
I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, it's been so much shuffling the last couple
Yeah,
games. Well, last night was what? It was
it
Panarin,
was
Zibanejad, Tarasenko, right?
yeah, and then it was
Kreider, Trocheck,
Kane,
Kane.
Trocheck, Vinny. Yep, and
So,
then it was Kidd, and then the fourth line of VZ, Gaudreau, and then Mott.
so listen, I've been outspoken about putting Kako up with Zibanejad and Kreider. I thought he's looked really good there this year, but as before you add Tarasenko and Kane, who really just have to be in the top six. Like, they have no business not being in the top six. And I think everyone loves the kid line together. So the combinations that we saw against Washington seem to look pretty good. I mean, Tarasenko has fit in perfectly with Zibanejad since he's gotten here. And, I think Mika and Panarin have had great chemistry on the power play, but they haven't been able to figure out at 5-on-5. But adding Tarasenko to that mix, they looked pretty strong, I thought, in the Capitals game. I think they combined for, what, 2 goals? 3 goals, that line?
Yeah, I think something like that, yeah.
And then, I think I think Kreider and Trocheck, I think the two of them have a ton of speed, and with Patrick Kane not being as fast as he once was, I think that brings value to him a little bit more, so he can not necessarily lack in that area with a line on Panarin, because the two of them aren't necessarily the fastest skaters, but they do have, that passing ability, the playmaking ability, and they can shoot the puck as well. But I liked the lines last night, and I think, it showed in the way they played. I don't think they're going to stick, because if history shows us anything, Jargoland's going to shuffle them up a lot. Yeah. So I think the bottom six is definitely steady. The kid line, VZ, Gaudreau, Mott. And then, anywhere in the top six, I think you can shuffle anybody with anyone.
Yeah, totally. And I definitely, totally agree there. You're spot on. What, if you had to, I guess, do you see potentially a world where we see a Panarin, Mika, Kane line? Or do you think that's, probably would?
I mean, that'd be sick. Like, who wouldn't want to watch that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mika's pretty solid defensively. Like, he's not a liability in the D zone, but I don't want to say I wouldn't like it, because obviously it'd be so exciting, but I almost feel like they might just force the puck to Mika too much, because he's the shooter. Whereas playing Kane with Panarin and Trocheck's not necessarily like a shooting threat, so Kane and Panarin have to shoot a little more. I think if they're with Mika, they defer to him a little bit more and try to get him the puck a little bit more, and they might force passes. Whereas a guy who's not as much of a shooter, they would shoot the puck more themselves. So I don't think it is a bad idea, but I'm curious to see how that would work.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I think they brought it up on the broadcast against, what was the Penguins on Saturday? I think it was on ESPN, the potential of that. And I agree with you. Like, sometimes they overpass a little bit, or they force the puck a little bit instead of shooting. We've seen that a little bit on the power play too with Panarin.
That's 20 years of Rangers hockey.
Yeah,
in my lifetime.
Yeah, they got to shoot. And that's what I've been saying that for a while. I think we also saw that last year too, as you mentioned. It's been forever with the Rangers where they pass the puck a lot. We talked a lot about the top six. Again, back to the bottom six. I've loved what we've seen out of the fourth line with VZ, Gaudreau, and then Mott has been very good. And obviously Mott coming back over at the trade deadline. Your thoughts on what they have brought? VZ yesterday getting a well-earned, empty netter. Nice goal to add onto his stat sheet. But your thoughts on them, and they've provided a lot of energy during this kind of period where we've struggled a little bit. They've been our most consistent and our best line, I think, during this kind of, rough period.
Yeah. I mean, especially, talking about Gaudreau and VZ, who we've seen, all season. We still haven't seen Tyler Mott for a full year in a Rangers uniform, and this is like his second stint. But, when you think about those two, I think they both have at least, Gaudreau has 11 goals. I think VZ got his 10th last night, right? That was 10. So your fourth liners having 10 plus goals, I think, a lot of teams would love to have that. Like, the fact that your fourth line can go out there and contribute offensively, I mean, and not allow the puck in their own net. Like, I think that's just what every team would want in a fourth line. And VZ, obviously, for what we got him for PTO this year, like, he's made the most of it, and he's, arguably earned like third line minutes even, but the Rangers are so
Mhm.
deep that he's not seeing that ice time. Gaudreau, he's also been a guy that's been up and down the lineup the entire season, and he's fit in quite nicely on each line. He hasn't been a guy who drives the play necessarily wherever he's put at, but he's just a solid guy, and he's been able to kill penalties and do all the little things that not everyone can do. So yeah, I mean, I think what more can you really ask for out of a fourth line? Mott we still haven't seen so much of because he's been hurt and whatnot, but yeah, no, I'm excited to see what these three can do when they have consistent ice time together.
Yeah, totally. And I think there'll also be, another line to add on to the kid line that could bring some physicality during the postseason. Because last year when Mott again hasn't been here for a full year, but last year during the postseason, he brought some nice physicality and some nice energy to this group. Do you feel he could be another one of those guys that, along with the kid line and along with some of our, other pieces that could bring that type of physicality come postseason?
Oh yeah, I mean Tyler Mott is Wayne Gretzky in the eyes of Ranger fans right now for just being a blue collar New York Ranger kind of style guy. He's not a guy that's afraid to block a shot even with a broken foot. I think he did it last year in the playoffs, or that might have been Gaudreau actually. But yeah, like Tyler Mott's the one who's going to get his nose dirty and do all those little things that don't show up in the score sheet. So yeah, I mean he's a guy that Ranger fans just I said it last year when he got traded originally. I was like, this is going to be a fan favorite in, at least 10 games just because, you've seen the guys in the past, like, off the top of my head, like he's not necessarily a Sean Avery in like his attitude, but just the way he plays the game, it's similar. Kind of stirs the pot a little bit, but isn't like necessarily a chirper and whatnot. But yeah, no, Tyler Mott is, a fan favorite for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, I think he had that goal too last year against Carolina. I believe it was,
Yeah.
what was it,
I mean,
game
terrible goal,
3?
but we'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It wasn't great, but
Yeah.
they all count. So,
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's definitely, it would be interesting as, we've mentioned so far, just how they mix these up and how this all ends up playing out. To touch on Lindgren a little bit, are you worried at all about his injury right now? I don't think he wasn't, obviously he's missed the past couple games. Are you worried
Yeah.
at all this is something that's going to continue to linger? Because it takes a lot to have him get knocked out for just the rest of a game, let alone multiple games in a row. And we saw him get beat up a couple times last year in the postseason. He would stay out there. Are you concerned at all that this is, dragging out a little bit, something that we've seen Lindgren play through a lot?
I mean, I think if this were the playoffs, he would be playing. But I think just because of the time of year that it is, they're going to make sure he's at the full 100%. And, listen, I'll happily let him sit out another 5 games if that's what it takes. Like I'm not too concerned about this team falling off in the standings. Like, make that guy healthy because he's going to take a beating all playoffs long, and we're going to need him as healthy as possible. So I'm not concerned because, I know that he's one of those guys like, you could step on him with a skate and he'll play, that's just how some hockey players are built. And, I think they're doing the smart thing right now by not forcing him back in the lineup. I mean, the Rangers are 8 points ahead of the wild card spot, I think, or even more, 10 points. So there is some breathing room. I think if the race was a little closer, he'd be in the lineup, but with the breathing room and all that, we're in a good spot to let him sit and get healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously what matters most is the postseason, and we're in a comfortable spot, as you mentioned, way up in the wild card spot and way up in the playoff positioning. So I totally agree. I'm not overly concerned. And I think again, it's all about the postseason, which is what this team's built for. So now moving on here, a little bit of, goaltending here, then we'll get into a little bit more about the upcoming schedule and then some of the other teams here in the Eastern Conference. But I want to talk a little bit Igor. Last season, obviously Vezina Trophy winner, had an excellent year. This year he's, I think as the Rangers team as a whole, kind of a slow start, got better, and now he's kind of finding his groove again. Your overall thoughts on him? Not quite the year he had last year, but I mean, he was putting up incredible numbers, but still a very, very good goaltender and one of the better ones, in the league, I still believe. So your thoughts on Igor?
Yeah, this is tough. I'm not a goalie, so it's hard for me to say, I guess, what the rhythm is or whatnot. But last year, the one thing I will say was the Rangers were a team that got outshot like almost every game. Like, the Rangers were not out shooting their opponent, and Igor was getting more touches, more reps, whatever you want to call it, and he knew he had to essentially steal a lot of games last year, Whereas this year, the Rangers seem to outshoot teams, but Igor just doesn't make those saves that he was making last year.
Yep.
So I don't know if it's like a touches thing. I know a lot of goalies do say they want to feel the puck early and get into a groove like right away in a game. And maybe, in those games where, like, I think about the Winnipeg game, I was at the game where the Rangers outshot Winnipeg 51-21 and Igor led in 4 goals. Like, he's not really seeing the puck that much. And when he did, it was an odd man rush that was, grade A chance against. So, I think the more pucks he sees, the better, obviously, but like you don't want to root for your team to get out chanced. So like it's a weird thing, as a fan, but I'm not concerned. Like he's shown us, if anything, that he raises his game when the stakes are the highest. So, he went toe to toe with Vasilevsky for 6 games, best goalie in the world. Didn't have a great Penguin series, but first real playoff series. So obviously a lot of nerves there. And Carolina, I thought he was great too. So, I think his last 4 starts have been better. He's 3-1-0, 2.68 goals against average, 0.904 save percentage. Like not the best numbers, but winning hockey games. So, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, exactly. And he's still, I think he's tied for 12th in the league, I think, in goals allowed per game. So he's still up, top, 15, top 12 in the league, and some of the numbers when you look at him. So, I definitely agree. And I think, again, the playoff experience last year, as you mentioned, was rough in the Pittsburgh series, but got better as the playoffs went on, both Carolina and Tampa. And then to touch on Halak a little bit, I know he was another guy got off to a really rough start as kind of a backup, but he's gotten better. I actually thought he played pretty well against Pittsburgh on Saturday, despite, the loss in overtime. But your thoughts on him in the couple, the games that he's played this year as a backup?
I mean, you couldn't ask for a worse start if you're a goalie. I think he lost like 0-7, I think his first 7 starts, something like that. But then he went on a tear and won like 7 out of 8. So, I mean, listen, like he's probably not going to see the ice much come playoff time.
No.
But he's been, a capable backup, I think, for most of the year. Like, I think Georgiev was worse last year. I don't think Georgiev was anything crazy to write home about. And he's obviously been incredible this year for Colorado, but like, you think about Halak, and he's obviously one of those older goalies too, right? Like, it's not like he's in the future plans. Like, he's kind of just here to help go on this run. I'm just trying to look at his numbers here. He's 8-3, 0.901 save percentage, 2.81 goals against average. Like, those aren't terrible numbers for a backup. I've seen a lot worse, like in Calgary, and Seattle's had some bad goaltending this year. But yeah, I think, Halak's done his job. And we're not going to see him much as we go along here anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And again, his really bad start, but has gone better. And as you mentioned, just a good quality backup for, the games that Igor's out. Now moving on here to a little bit of, the upcoming schedule. Obviously a big win last night, against the Capitals to kind of get back on track before Pittsburgh comes to town. And although, again, the standings were 8 games up on Pittsburgh, it's still, I feel like, important for this team to come out and hopefully take these next 2 games, really gain some separation. I mean, if we could take these next 2 games, you're looking at a potential, I think, a 12-point lead on Pittsburgh. So you really start to gain some separation. Your thoughts on, these next 2 games, and then, some of the games moving forward into, including later this month too, against Carolina.
Yeah, so I think these next 2 games against Pittsburgh, those are going to be the true emotional tests, right? Like, you want to see this team ramp up their emotion and just their, I don't want to say like engagement, but competitiveness, I guess would be the better word. These are going to be playoff games, these 2 games against Pittsburgh. But if I know anything about the Rangers, they're going to play great in both games. They might win both. They might lose one. They probably won't lose both. But if I know one thing for sure, they're going to lose at home against Nashville on Saturday, because that's the second game of a back-to-back. Their emotions are going to be very high for these 2 games against Pittsburgh. It was high against Washington, and it's really hard to do that, 3 games in 4 nights. And I think they're just going to be due for a stinker against a Nashville team that's also fighting for a playoff spot. The Predators aren't too far out of the race themselves, and they put together some good games here as of late as well. So, I expect the Rangers to, if not win both games, at least split against Pittsburgh. And then I think Nashville comes in and wins like 4-1. Like, like that Columbus game earlier in the year when the Blue Jackets won 5-1. And that was just like such a terrible game to watch. I think it's going to be one of those.
Yeah, and especially with Carolina coming to town Tuesday, Thursday, you're going to be That's going to be their focus. And they'll probably, as much as we just talked about Halak, they probably will play Halak because obviously they're not going to probably put Igor in back-to-back Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
So kind of, I guess, close things out here a little bit. When you look at the Eastern Conference, which is loaded, I mean, it really is, it's loaded. You got Carolina, you got New Jersey, both in the Metro, and then Boston, who's obviously just nobody can beat them, although the Red Wings beat them over the weekend. But
and the Blackhawks last night.
Yeah, which is
that was wild.
Yeah. But when you look at, the Eastern Conference, the Rangers, there's a good chance if things line up, they might have to play the Devils, Carolina, and Boston, 3 rounds of playoffs, which will probably be, those teams are probably better than any team they'll face in the final. So they come out of the Eastern Conference, you feel good about their chances of winning the Stanley Cup, given the fact that the 3 teams they play to get to these, to get to the Stanley Cup, probably going to be the best teams they see. What does this Ranger team needs to do? And who are you most concerned about, playing?
Well, I guess to start, I wouldn't feel that confident of their chances to win the Cup, even if they get out of the Eastern Conference, just depending on what happens in the Western Conference. Because you look at last year, Colorado Avalanche played Nashville in round 1. They sweep 4 games. They play a tough series against the Blues, but it goes 6, and they win with like 5 seconds left. Then they play the Edmonton Oilers in the conference final, and they sweep 4 games again. So their road to get there was not that difficult. They lost 2 games in 3 rounds. So they had all the gas in their legs when they met Tampa, and Tampa was obviously, in a tough 7-game series against Toronto. They swept Florida, but that was still a physical, battle of Florida, tough series, and they play the Rangers in a really tough 6-game series. So they were a little more battle tested come Stanley Cup final, and that's what I think is going to happen again this year. With the Eastern Conference, these teams are just going to beat the crap out of each other for 3 rounds. And that's still going to happen in the West, but I think the parity is just so much more evident in the East right now. So I do fear the Bruins, but listen, who's to say the Bruins don't get surprised also? If the Bruins play the Islanders in the first round, they might face a hot Ilya Sorokin, and the Islanders play a shutdown kind of game. So I would not count out the Islanders in that series. I think if you're Boston, you want to play Pittsburgh. But, as far as other teams in the East go, Carolina probably at this point, scares me the least, which is crazy to say. Yeah. But losing Svechnikov, not having Pacioretty, we've had their number pretty much the last 2 years. They're a team that I'm hoping to play in the first round. I want the Devils to win the division. I've said that openly. I also think it'd be great for the Rangers to win a round and then have to play the Devils, because they play the Devils in the first round. They might just have their wires crossed or whatever. But yeah, I can't remember being more excited for a playoffs ever in my life. This is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, it's so much talent. As you mentioned too, the Islanders are a sneaky team because a very good third period team, very good, late game team. And those teams we saw last year with the Rangers fall down early, come back. Those teams can go deep into the postseason. So it's definitely interesting. I agree with you. I'm actually not that scared of Carolina. The Devils, I can't stand the Devils. I would love to beat them. And I agree too. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, Boston's insane, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't be shocked if they great regular season, get all this hype in, everyone's, Boston's winning it all. It's going to be, easy for them. And then they just lose in 6 in the first round or something like that. I wouldn't be shocked. It's, it would definitely be interesting, but it's going to be a tough road and a long road. So I guess talking about the East, who do you see coming out of the West, which is still kind of just all over the place?
It's been really tough. Part of me was thinking it was going to be Vegas, and they've been good. Adding Jonathan Quick's obviously been huge, and he's looked great in his first couple of games. I think he's 4-0. So I think Vegas could do it. I'm not counting them out at all. A fully healthy Colorado team still scares me. They haven't really been healthy all year long. But then you look at teams like Minnesota right now, who was not scary a month ago. That's 7-0-3 in their last 10 games. They're on a run. And they've been great defensively. So Dallas too. Jake Ottinger's been strong all year. And then I haven't even mentioned Edmonton yet. The Oilers, just to me, their goaltending is obviously a huge question mark, but the Oilers are the best offensive team in the league, best power play in the league. They can score 6 goals a night. There's a lot of good teams in the West, and they're not getting enough credit this year because the East has just been so good. But you look at these teams in the West, and they're getting hot at the right times. Like, I'm looking at the standings right now. Dallas in their last 10, 7-2-1. Minnesota 7-0-3. Colorado 6-3-1. Vegas 7-2-1. Los Angeles, another sneaky team. Corpusalo,
Yeah.
great addition. 7-1-2. And then Edmonton 6-4-0. But like, these teams, like, and even the wild card, like Connor Hellebuck was a Vezina winning goalie. Like, he could get hot. It's crazy. There's so much talent in the NHL right now. It's truly nuts. But to answer your question, if I had to narrow it down and pick one team, I might go Vegas. I've honestly like always counted on Vegas, I think, since after their first season. And that's a tough place to play in. So Jonathan Quick, I'm not going to count them out.
Yeah, I agree that Jonathan Quick trade, from the Kings to Columbus for a little bit and then to Vegas was interesting, but I think he wasn't playing at the highest level ever in LA, and then he goes to Vegas now and he's rejuvenated back right into the heart of the race. So it's interesting. And you mentioned with the Oilers, they're Connor McDavid, as long as he's on fire, as long as he's, doing his thing, they're always going to, they're going to be in the conversation, obviously. And as you mentioned, they're a team that can put up 5-6 goals a night. So it'll be interesting. It's going to be a fun postseason. So to kind of close things out here, where can everybody find you? You're obviously doing a ton of stuff. Where can everybody, find you, social media and your podcast and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely doing a lot. I'll plug my new show I'm doing also. It's called Dump and Change. It's an NHL betting show, twice a week, Tuesdays, Fridays, and then the Blue Crew, which is every Monday or Tuesday. It's not, one or the other. It's kind of dependent on the Ranger schedule that week. But you can find me at JLazzy23 on Twitter, and then my name, just Jonny Lazarus on Instagram. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and this was fun, Bubbs. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate having your coming on, and a lot of fun, and hopefully potentially playoffs, talk some more Ranger hockey as we get closer here to the postseason. So that has been another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.